There's a plethora of cold cases in the world, with many of them dating back as far as the 1800s. A criminal case that has had little evidence, information, or leads is likely to go cold after a period of inactivity, meaning that although the case still exists and can be accessed, an ongoing investigation is no longer in progress. Cold cases can sit in storage for decades on end before they're ever reopened. In some very special instances, though, cold cases are reopened and investigated again with the use of modern, advanced technology. These cold cases were finally solved after years of silence. Number 5. Early on the morning of August 25, 1981, 18-year-old Jeannie Moore left her home and walked to a nearby busy street. She traveled to Harlan Street, where she began hitchhiking for a ride to work near an on-ramp for westbound Interstate 70. According to county cold case files, she was trying to catch a ride at a Tenneco gas station on 13th Avenue and Wadsworth Boulevard in Lakewood. According to her friends and family, this is a common routine for Jeannie. When she arrived at the on-ramp, she was approached by a red vehicle, described as possibly a 1969 or 1970 Ford LTD or Galaxy with a black vinyl top. Witnesses at a nearby gas station saw Jeannie try to open the passenger door of the car. After a struggle, the driver leaned over and opened the door from the inside. This was the last time anyone would see Jeannie alive. Jeannie failed to return home at her usual time that night, and her family started to worry. It was unlike Jeannie not to call her house in the event that she was going to be late. They called her friends and her employer, but no one had seen her after she caught a ride. The following day, her family reported her missing and a huge search was conducted. Sadly, on August 30th, just 5 days after she went missing, Jeannie's body was found. A group of picnickers stumbled across the horrific scene at Genesee Park. Her remains were immediately collected and an autopsy showed that she passed away due to serious blows to the head. After the discovery, an investigation was opened to find Jeannie's attacker. Sadly, months passed with no new information or possible suspects. Eventually, those months turned to years and law enforcement had to stop their work, ultimately because the case ran cold. However, a major breakthrough appeared years later. In 2019, Jeannie's case was reevaluated. Officers submitted decades-old evidence of the suspect to new research systems and databases. It was later discovered that the main suspect was no stranger to Jeannie. In fact, it was her own father. Elias Alberti was allegedly found as the main suspect and the source of the crime scene DNA. Her father attacked and assaulted her before being the cause of her death. A lead investigator responded to the results by saying further investigation led to identify Perea as being 3.3 trillion times more likely than anyone else in this world to have committed the murder. At the time of Jeannie's passing, her father was out on a bond for violent rape charges. He'd previously served a lengthy prison sentence in Colorado between 1982 and 1985. When the truth was uncovered and he was charged again, the family felt shame for their relative's sadistic actions, but they also felt great relief in finally finding out the answers for their loved one's passing. Number 4. On October 1st, 1991, Denise Sharon Kolb moved into a small apartment with her then-boyfriend, Theodore Donahue. It's unclear exactly why, but 2 weeks after settling into the apartment, Denise took off by moving out of the Philadelphia home. Theodore reported to police that the last time he saw Denise was on October 18, 1991, when the couple purchased and used crack. Apparently, they were robbed at knife point and Denise took off, never to be seen again. Her sister's statement, which was reported later, claimed that Denise was seen outside of a local bar arguing with Theodore before storming off and vanishing. Law enforcement was contacted and a search began. Denise's remains were later found in a wooded area of town on November 12, 1991. Her remains were clothed in a heavy sweater, 2 pairs of pants, a jacket, a t-shirt, and 1 yellow sock. This sock stuck out to detectives because they assumed the other matching sock would serve as a significant evidence in the case. The case drew on for decades with no new evidence or information though. Friends and relatives of Denise shared their reports countless times as they continued to stick to their story. Except for Theodore, who later changed most of his claims. In 2015, while being interviewed for the second time, Theodore said that the last time he saw Denise was outside of a bar on October 19, 1991, a claim that greatly differed from his original story. Another witness came forward during this time to report information that had not been previously shared with law enforcement. They shared details, including Theodore's phone records, several handwritten memos reminding him to return to Denise's calls, and a rough draft of her obituary. In 2019, the case was reopened, and information was added to an abundance of DNA and genealogy websites that had recently hit the internet. A sock was found in Theodore's home which matched Denise's yellow sock as well as her DNA. Still, the case lacked substantial evidence, so the police turned to friends and relatives of Theodore to build a case based on circumstantial evidence. He was arrested in 2019 after the sock also came back as a match to his DNA, and he was charged with first-degree murder. Denise's family was finally given some kind of peace after 28 years when the news spread. Number 3. This entry revolves around a man named Lee Miller, who in 2019 was charged with 2 separate cases involving the lost lives of women. In 1992, 57-year-old Marilyn Hickey was reported missing by her loved ones after failing to return home for several days. Reports from witnesses and a bartender confirmed that Marilyn was last seen at the Drift Inn with a random man. Marilyn was eventually found stabbed in her apartment days after a local search had begun. The scene offered investigators little to work with. However, they found traces of male DNA. At the time, technology was not advanced enough to offer a name or address of the man involved in the crime. Despite constant work, the case was set aside and went cold. A sketch of the man that Marilyn was with last was shared with the media but led to a dead end, with no witness reports or sightings being called in either. A similar case occurred in April of 1994, when Cheryl Barat was found deceased in her apartment after a night out at a local bar. Again, male DNA was found at the crime scene, but a match was never found, so the case inevitably went cold. In 2019, both cases were suddenly reopened when investigators had the brilliant idea of submitting new evidence to DNA databases. When the DNA for both cases was reevaluated, investigators failed to find a match. However, they found something just as groundbreaking. The male DNA at both crime scenes was a match, meaning the crimes were committed by the same killer. The Boise Police Department and Bremerton Police Department joined forces to locate a suspect. Both departments came back with a match for a man named Lee Robert Miller. His DNA was collected as an extra precaution, and detectives were faced with yet another confirming detail that linked Lee to both cases. He was apprehended in early 2019 and charged not only for these 2 cases, but a similar murder case from another time period. A family member of Cheryl said, "Our family would like to thank all the detectives involved in this case for finding a suspect and now a charge in Cheryl's murder. We refer to her as Sherry. She was fun and she had such a great personality and was such an animal lover. She was there for all the big milestones in our lives, and today we're thankful for closure after 25 years. Number 2. 20-year-old Jay Cook and his girlfriend Tonya left their Canadian hometown on November 18, 1987 for an overnight trip to Seattle, Washington to purchase parts for Jay's father. Travel information showed that their last documented ride was on a ferry to Bremerton. The couple previously told their family that they would be back by afternoon the next day, November 19th. However, they never arrived and failed to call anyone informing them that they would be late. On November 20th, both families were overwhelmed with concern and reported the couple as missing. A search spread from their destination to their hometown, but unfortunately, on November 24th, Tonya's remains were found dumped in a ditch by a rural road in Washington. She was half nude and had clearly been abused and attacked. Investigators automatically assumed that her boyfriend, Jay, was to blame, despite members of both families arguing that Jay was innocent. The following day, Tonya's belongings were found in Jay's van, along with some plastic ties that were used to restrain her, plastic gloves, and a collection of receipts from gas and train stations. On November 26th, 2 days after Tonya was found, the remains of Jay Cook were discovered 60 miles from where Tonya had been dumped. Autopsy reports showed that he was choked and hit with rocks. From DNA and other evidence obtained from the van, officers speculated that the suspect was familiar with the prison system and was careful to remove all incriminating evidence. Officers were still lucky enough to obtain DNA samples though, but they had no success in finding a match. Even if the killer had been previously incarcerated, it was before DNA data storage was common practice, leaving no trail for officers to follow. After a long period of inactivity, the case went cold, but it was reopened in 2018 when investigators used DNA samples and advanced databases to create a detailed sketch of the killer, based on DNA found on Tonya's body. Additionally, The DNA was submitted to a genealogy database, and 2 distant cousins of the suspect were located. Then 55-year-old truck driver William Talbot II was declared the main suspect in the case. In 2019, he was arrested, and a DNA test confirmed that he was a match for the evidence found at the crime scene. He's currently serving 2 life sentences. Number 1. 60-year-old Gwen Miller was a hospital pharmacist living in Rapid City when she vanished on February 29, 1968. When Gwen didn't arrive for work, everyone began to worry. Gwen was living alone and was older than the average employee, which made her coworkers constantly concerned about her well-being. In this case, though, they were not overreacting. They tried to call many of her friends and relatives, but everyone reported that they had not seen her. Finally, her coworkers reported her missing and made a trip to her house. After they arrived on the scene, her coworkers opened her unlocked front door to find Gwen lying lifeless in her bed. Law enforcement was quickly contacted, and an autopsy showed that Gwen had been sexually assaulted and attacked. Although a thorough investigation followed the discovery of Gwen's remains, the case failed to progress with new evidence or possible leads. After a few months, it sadly went cold, and the friends and loved ones of Gwen assumed they would never find answers to their burning questions. In 2019, a break in the case surprised those that had left the truth behind. The DNA found at the scene was submitted to modern genealogy databases, and a match was found. Eugene Field was found to be the main suspect due to his DNA. Additionally, though, it was revealed that Eugene worked at a nearby airport which Gwen frequented, and he rented a small house owned by Gwen's neighbor to get close to her. While the impressive conclusion seemed as though it would lead to Eugene's arrest and justice would finally be served, things didn't go exactly as planned. Officers quickly discovered that the suspect had passed away due to cancer-related illness 10 years before the truth was revealed. While officers couldn't charge a deceased man, the idea of the truth finally being revealed was enough to give Gwen's family some sort of relief. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos. And if you enjoyed this narration, maybe consider checking out my personal channel at youtube.com/Ty_knots.